James Kim Knoll was not a man who easily faded into history. Born in the mid-20th century, he became known as a brilliant psychiatrist whose work often blurred the lines between science and the shadows of the human mind. Colleagues described him as deeply intelligent, yet drawn to the more unsettling corners of psychology, exploring what compelled people toward darkness, crime, and even acts of violence. Knoll's career reached a pivotal point when he began writing extensively on what he termed the banality of evil. He examined how ordinary individuals, under certain pressures, could carry out extraordinary cruelty. His essays, published in respected journals, earned both admiration and unease. Readers were left with the sense that Knoll understood not only the mechanisms of the human psyche, but also its most fragile breaking points. Yet, the deeper he studied, the more questions seemed to surround him. Some claimed Knoll knew more about criminal behavior than he revealed. Others suggested his fascination with the abnormal mind stemmed from personal battles he never disclosed. Despite decades of work, much about his private life remained sealed, hidden behind the professional reputation he carefully maintained. Today, James Kim Knoll stands as both a pioneer and an enigma. His writings continue to be cited in psychology and criminology, but the man himself remains a mystery. Was he simply a scholar dedicated to understanding humanity's darker instincts, or was there something more personal he was trying to uncover? In May of 1999, a 69-year-old man named Carl Landers set out on what was meant to be a challenging but rewarding climb. A seasoned hiker from California, Landers had scaled Mount Whitney and Mount Shasta, and now he had his sights on Mount Shasta again, this time with close friends. On May 25th, Landers, along with two companions, began the ascent up the icy, rugged slopes. By all accounts, he was healthy, experienced, and determined. At around 10,000 feet, suffering from altitude sickness and fatigue, he told his friends he would push on ahead to reach a rest stop. They agreed to meet him there. But when his companions arrived, Carl Landers was gone. Search teams scoured the mountain for days. Helicopters circled the snow-covered ridges, rescue dogs traced his possible path, and rangers explored every crevice. Yet no equipment, no clothing, not even a single footprint was ever found. It was as if he had stepped off the mountain and vanished into thin air. Speculations quickly spread. Some suggested he may have wandered off the trail and succumbed to the elements. Others wondered if the mountain itself, long tied to native legends and mystical lore, had swallowed him in some unexplained way. To this day, no trace of Carl Landers has ever been discovered. More than 20 years later, the disappearance of Carl Landers remains one of Mount Shasta's most enduring mysteries, a reminder that even in places we believe we know, the Earth can still hold secrets it refuses to give up. In January of 1980, a man named Paul Braxton Fugate walked into Chiricahua National Monument in southeastern Arizona and was never seen again. Fugate wasn't a tourist, he was a 41-year-old park ranger, a man whose life was dedicated to the land he protected. On January 13th, he put on his uniform, signed in at the visitor center, and set out for a routine patrol along the park's trails. He never returned. Searchers began combing the rugged canyons and towering rock spires that define the monument. Dozens of rangers, trackers, and helicopters scoured the terrain, yet there was no trace, no footprints, no equipment, not even a piece of his uniform. It was as if the desert itself had swallowed him whole. Rumors and theories quickly spread. Some believed Fugate may have been murdered, possibly by illegal traffickers who often used the borderlands nearby. Others speculated he could have staged his own disappearance, though those closest to him rejected the idea, pointing to his deep commitment to his work. The most unsettling detail is that Fugate remains the only National Park Service ranger ever to vanish while on duty without a trace. His disappearance forced the Park Service to declare him missing in the line of duty, a rare and haunting designation. To this day, more than 4 decades later, Paul Braxton Fugate's fate remains unknown. Was he the victim of a hidden crime, or did he encounter something on those trails that left no sign behind? The Chiricahua Canyons still hold the answer, but they have never spoken. In the 1800s, the name Ezra Cooke briefly surfaced in New England history, then disappeared almost as quickly as the man himself. Records describe him as a quiet but ambitious settler, drawn to the dense forests and rocky valleys of Vermont. He lived on the edge of the frontier, where survival depended on both resourcefulness and resilience. But Cooke's story is remembered less for how he lived than for how he vanished. Local accounts tell of a winter evening when Cooke set out to check his trap lines along a wooded ridge. He never returned. Searchers found his footprints leading deep into the snow, then stopping abruptly, as if the trail itself had ended. Neither his body, his belongings, nor any clear explanation was ever uncovered. Over time, Cooke's disappearance was woven into the folklore of the region. Some believed he had fallen victim to hidden ravines or sudden storms. Others spoke of strange lights seen in the sky that winter, suggesting that what took him was not of this world. His name passed quietly into town records, but the absence of answers gave rise to whispers that continue to this day. Ezra Cooke remains one of countless early Americans whose lives slipped into mystery without resolution. He left behind no written testimony, only silence. Was he simply lost to the unforgiving wilderness, or was there something deeper at work in those remote hills? The question lingers, suspended in history, unanswered. In October of 1984, 3-year-old Laura Bradbury was camping with her family in Joshua Tree National Park, California. The desert was quiet, the sky vast and open, when she vanished without a sound. Laura had been playing just a few feet from her parents' camper when she was last seen. In the short span of a few minutes, she was gone. What followed was one of the largest searches in Joshua Tree's history. Rangers, sheriff's deputies, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers scoured the rugged desert. Dogs tracked her scent for only a short distance before it disappeared completely. No footprints, no torn clothing, nothing to explain where she had gone. Days stretched into weeks, but the Bradbury family never received closure. Rumors circulated. Some believed Laura had been abducted from the campground by an unknown passerby. Others pointed to the harsh desert itself, its cliffs, crevices, and wildlife capable of hiding a small child forever. For years, the case remained unsolved, a haunting reminder of how quickly someone could vanish in the wilderness. Then, years later, human remains were discovered near the area. While DNA evidence could not fully confirm the identity, authorities believed they belonged to Laura. Yet even this discovery failed to provide answers. How she disappeared and what truly happened that day remains uncertain. Today, the story of Laura Bradbury lingers as both tragedy and mystery. A child lost in the desert, a family left with questions, and a national park that holds a silence it has never broken. In the summer of 1996, Randy Morgenson, veteran backcountry ranger, vanished in California's Sequoia and Kings Canyon. For nearly 30 years, Morgenson had lived and worked in the Sierra Nevada wilderness, patrolling remote trails, rescuing stranded hikers, and embodying the solitude of the mountains he loved. He knew the terrain better than almost anyone alive. On July 21st, Morgenson failed to check in by radio as scheduled. At first, colleagues assumed he was delayed on patrol, but as hours turned into days, concern mounted. A massive search effort began. Rangers, helicopters, and volunteers scouring hundreds of square miles of rugged peaks, alpine lakes, and glacial valleys. Yet no trace of him was found. Speculation grew. Some believed Morgenson, who had spoken of personal struggles in the years prior, may have walked into the wilderness intending never to return. Others argued that his deep knowledge of the land made such a mistake or voluntary disappearance unlikely. It wasn't until 5 years later that the mystery shifted. In 2001, searchers discovered skeletal remains in a remote canyon, identified as Morgenson's. Evidence suggested he had fallen into a steep ravine, likely swept away by rushing water while on patrol. And yet, even with an answer, the story carries a sense of unresolved mystery. For many who knew him, Morgenson's disappearance and death remain a haunting reflection of the very wilderness he devoted his life to. Beautiful, unforgiving, and filled with secrets that only the mountains keep. On July 4, 2012, 65-year-old Michael LeMaitre stood at the starting line of Alaska's Mount Marathon race, a brutal 3-mile course up and down a near-vertical mountain in Seward, Alaska. Known as one of the toughest short-distance races in the world, it